Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Harauz, and I'm here to take you through some 360 VR workflows directly inside of Adobe Premiere Pro using Boris's VR units. There are 5 filters, effects in particular that we're going to take a look at. And we're going to compare it to some of the tools. There are 360 VR tools available inside of Premiere Pro, but we're going to take a good comparison and look why we might want to also use the Boris VR tools, as they are cross-platform, and that we can share it with other people on another system, such as DaVinci Resolve, when we're in a workflow that involves finishing in an application such as that. So I'm already inside of Adobe Premiere Pro, and the first thing that we're going to take a look at is 2 of the filters from the VR package, and that is going to be Reorient as well as Insert. So there is a Reorient filter inside of Premiere Pro, and at any time you can bring up your effects menu. In fact, I'm going to go window here to effects. And if you type in the word VR, anything that's already installed in Premiere Pro will be under an immersive video category. And you can become familiar with those effects. What allows us to do a very popular task in 360, which is to essentially drive the user's attention to where they might be looking in their VR environment, is to reorient our sphere. As right now, what you're looking at is a distorted view of a clip called equirectangular. And this image is meant to be wrapped around a sphere. In fact, if I toggle onto my VR video display, you'll see that I'm now able to view this like the viewer will by turning on this VR view mode. And this is what's available to me inside of Premiere Pro. The controls for this VR mode or display are available under the VR video section here under settings, where we can also choose to show controls like rotation, as well as change our settings for things such as the field of view to mimic certain headsets. So with that, we could use that in essentially a filter called Rotate Sphere to change what our viewer is going to look at. So let me actually turn off this clip here, and we're just looking at the exact same image and how this was processed in a stitching platform. So multiple cameras shot this image, and they were all stitched together to form this, and this was then brought inside of Premiere Pro. And we just want to be able to rotate this. Rather than use the immersive video category, I'm going to hop over to my BCC11 VR folder, and let's choose the BCC VR Reorient. Just going to drop it onto my clip, and I'm going to reveal the effect controls for this by pressing Shift-5. One thing that I can do is to make sure of the import format that I'm working with. So this is a monoscopic clip, and it is a full 360-degree capture. These controls here at the top allow me to, of course, pan, tilt, as well as roll my image, just in case this image wasn't dead on for what I wanted the user to look at when we cut to this clip, as in if they had a head-mounted display or Google Cardboard and we're looking front view on a camera. Ideally, we're going to want this to look at this person. And these controls are very similar to some of the ones in Premiere Pro, but where it starts to differ is in all the extra controls that are available, as well as the formats that we can work with. So one thing that's inside the VR Reorient is your ability to actually have a preview mode. And this preview mode allows us to preview an image left and right. But the thing that I love about this is using this in conjunction with a picture-in-picture overlay. So without having to step out and use a VR player, if I reveal this picture mode on the top left-hand corner, here is my equirectangular view. And in the same frame inside my program monitor, I also have the ability to, of course, preview my image using these controls left and right, up and down. Now, where it gets better is also how you can see or figure out what you're looking at. So on top of this preview mode and being able to see the preview of the equirectangular image on the top left-hand corner, and by the way, you can control the size of this, no problem, by simply dragging on the PIP scale. We can also choose to turn on overlay guides. So these overlay guides will reveal the different sides of the camera. So here is the front-facing camera. And I can also reveal faces, which is going to give me a cover overlay or color overlay that I can play with in terms of its opacity. And as I preview around my sphere, I can see what part of the camera I'm looking at, as well as control the field of view of the camera to mimic either a head-mounted display or how someone might view my image if they headed to YouTube. And all this control is available under this Reorient filter. Now, here are some extra bonuses for this. So I'm just going to actually turn this off. And I want to just head over to a example of some 180-degree footage. So 180-degree footage, what it does is it shoots only half of a sphere. There are multiple reasons why 180-degree cameras are coming up on the market, and one big one is bandwidth. Since we're only filming half the spherical image, well, what we actually have is the ability to have smaller file sizes. The other big reason is there was a bunch of studies done when people were watching VR on various social media networks, and it discovered that most people don't turn around the entire sphere. They don't turn around the entire way. I'm going to reveal the properties of this clip to you, and how I'm going to do that is I'm going to right-click this. I'm going to reveal my project, reveal this in the project. This is going to hop me out to my bin. Let me just try that again to reveal this inside the project. In fact, I'll just actually right-click this clip and reveal its properties so that you can see it. Here are the properties of this clip. We can see that it is an equirectangular image, stereoscopic side-by-side or left eye and right eye. And then we can see the captured view, which is 180 degrees, both horizontal and vertical. I actually had to go into the Premiere Pro settings. In fact, if a clip is never identified as something that's VR in Premiere Pro, what you could do is essentially hop to that footage. I'm here in my project panel in my bin. And if I right-click any clip and choose to modify, interpret the footage, for any reason, if a clip wasn't identified as something that was VR, you could come here and conform that clip to the appropriate projection, i.e., let's say equirectangular, and what from a monoscopic or a stereoscopic flavor, over, under, or side by side. Since this is 180 footage, I had to manually come onto that clip, onto that 180 clip, and reveal the horizontal captured view, as in this is a newer camera format. And now I also want to have the ability to look around this 180 captured view. So if once I change this and also changed my sequence settings to mimic that projection, that equirectangular stereoscopic side-by-side view, if I go here to my VR video display, it allows me to move around this image, but only seeing the front-facing side. In a 180 experience, you're still able to look all around you. It's just what's going to be behind you is in fact going to be black. I actually took some test footage of a Google video online here, and just to show this to you without my VR mode. This is image taken from my iPhone. I was on YouTube at the time. And what I did is I toggled a button on YouTube called, which allows me to see images through Google Cardboard. So right now this is mimicking the left and right eyes of this 180 content. And just notice that what's happening here, if I play this back, I'm actually tilting my phone to the left and right. And as I tilt to the sides, what we see is black on the other side of the sphere. And this is how 180 footage is. And in some cases, what I'd like to do is be able to see behind this image. And this is one great reason for using the Reorient inside of Premiere Pro. If I head here and go into my Effects tab and grab my BCC VR Reorient, I'll drop that onto my 180 footage. And the first thing I'm going to do in my effect controls is identify this as the appropriate format. So this is a stereo left-right. The horizontal field of view happens to be 180 degrees. And for output format, I'm going to choose stereo left-right. But I can also choose just to view the left eye or the right eye. And now, regardless of which eye I choose, when I start to either head down to my section here and change my view mode to say preview, when I start to look to the left and right, I actually do see what's behind me and I'm not delimited by how you can look at things in the VR mode inside of Premiere Pro. I'm able to see that there is nothing behind my sphere. In fact, at that, I could do other things where if I wanted to, in certain cases, just have my 180 image replicated on the other side of the sphere, I could easily do that using those controls. So this is going to be an extension of Premiere Pro that allows you, in many cases, to get even further with reorienting your footage and working directly inside of Premiere Pro. Now, I also want to show here, I'm going to just disable this effect and hop over to another sequence called the Reorient for alignment. As video editors, not only do you now have to worry about cutting when it comes to 360 VR video, but you also have to be aware of where are you going to draw the user's attention to when you cut to your next shot. And here I have some shots from Washington, D.C. at a monument. And if I move between the edit point of these two clips, we can see here one shot of the Lincoln Memorial over here on the right-hand side, and the other one where it has it dead centered. Ideally for this cut, for this perspective, and for the storyline that I've chosen, ideally what I'd like to do is reorient the shot so that it's dead centered in the middle of the frame, and also use my overlay and faces to help me align the shot better, combined with Premiere Pro's new comparison view mode added in the latest version of CC 2018. So here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to position my playhead over the second clip, but I'm going to drag my BCC VR Reorient to the clip that I want to change its perspective. Okay, so this is an input format of mono and 360 degrees. And by using this comparison view mode, what we can see now is my second clip here and my first clip here. In fact, I'm going to do a wipe instead. So you can sort of see on the right-hand side, the Lincoln Memorial, and on this side, we're just staring at the Washington Monument. Now, using multiple controls, first of all, I'm going to head to my overlays and turn on my picture-in-picture to see the equirectangular format. While I'm using that, I'm also going to turn on my overlay guides on my clip here. I'm going to change this clip's view. By using the enable or reorientation view, I can align where the Lincoln Memorial is going to be when we cut from this shot to the next shot, sort of aligning them here on the edge and using my comparison view mode to do a comparison. And here we have a tool because of these overlays and because of this picture-in-picture that allows us to get a better sense of how we cut from one clip to another inside of Premiere Pro simply using these overlay tools. And of course, we can also use overlay faces. And as we've seen before, play around with the opacity. Okay. So there's some great reasons for using the VR reorients in conjunction with the already built-in VR tools inside of Premiere Pro. And I'm going to show this in a second, but I can't emphasize enough the ability to have these plugins as cross-platform. So let me hop into a little bit about VR insert right now. How are the questions going? Everything's okay so far?
Hey, Nick, can you hear me okay?
I can totally hear you, Ross.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I think that we've been answering the questions. There's definitely been a couple questions about 180 video versus 360. And you know, we know internally here at Boris FX that 180, there's been a big buzz and push in the industry in the last month or last couple months. Yeah. I'm looking for some references online to show that that 180, yeah, that most viewers are looking at 180 as opposed to the 360. I'm trying to find some online article links to share with with some people. But
that's a great question. I actually have a resource, Ross, that I can share. If you guys head to YouTube, but you guys have to head on your phone, and on YouTube, just do a search for VR 180. It's going to bring you to the Google, I believe it's called the Dream Project. And the Dream Project is all about VR 180. So it shows if you have a Google Cardboard, you can see the 180 experience. But even if you toggle on just the Cardboard button, you can see what 180 looks like. And through that thread, there are a ton of suggestions and articles on the 180 cameras that are coming to market, such as the Yi and what's also offered from Google.
Yeah,
Hope that
exactly.
helps.
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
there's been a lot of 180 news in the last couple months, and specifically some of these new 180 cameras are shipping right now. Our friends at
Yes.
Kando just announced a Kickstarter on their new camera, their KuCam. So yeah, so thanks for that, Nick. But no, why don't you let's move on.
Awesome. So we're now going to take a look at VR Insert. And there is an immersive video tool here, which allows you to take any type of, like, let's say a flat logo, or maybe you have a graphic or still image that you want to incorporate in your 360 production. The effect under the immersive video is called plane to sphere. And you can drag that onto a clip and then have it oriented or projected in a 360 VR video. Now, the VR insert is Boris's solution for this, and there are some features in this that are just awesome. One of my favorites, which we're going to see here in a second, called Replicate. So how I want to demonstrate this is in the April release of Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2018, under the Essential Graphics panel comes a variety of additional templates that are now offered through Adobe Stock. And if you just bring out, you can always bring this up by going to the window menu and choosing Essential Graphics. And here we can preview what's available on Adobe Stock. And if you're not looking to pay for any premium stock motion graphic templates, you can do a search for free templates here. And here's one, this kind of little call out style, which I really like. And there's a VR 360 video, an interview with Michelle Obama. I forget the company that did this, but the way that they employed motion graphics in their 360 experience is pretty awesome. And this reminds me of some of the callouts that they used. They created some of the motion graphics in After Effects, and at that time, they used Metals plugins, which are now built inside of After Effects. So you could grab a template like this and download this to your system, and then it's going to be saved under My Templates. If I just do a search for that video, I'll be able to find it. I'm just going to drag and drop this here into the timeline. And if I turn on my V2 track, we can kind of see the call out style. I'm just going to make a couple changes. Right there in the program modder, I'm going to call this Diver 1. And there in the optional text, and by the way, sometimes I always have problems writing text here, but with the ability of the After Effects templates, you can do that right in the Essential Graphics panel too. So I'll just type in the words underwater. So here is this template, and I want to incorporate it in my 360 scene. And just to show you, if I go or toggle my VR video display, just notice how this text appears warped and this is not how I want it to appear in my 360 experience. So I'm going to use the BCC VR insert. And for this particular example, we're going to work through a couple of the challenges that are going to show up along the way, just to give you a sense of how fluent this workflow is. So I'm going to place the VR insert on my video 1 track. And with my effect control showing up, what I'm going to do is say the layer that I'd like to basically insert into my 360 experience. And that happens to be on video track 2. It's actually already referenced it. It just happens to be small and in the background here. And if I turned off my text temporarily, disabled it, we can see it right there off in the background. Now, what I'll do with the layer still selected is just go to the insert scale and start to scale this up. And we're going to see a problem that shows up. The problem is it's actually referencing the original template. It's not referencing the text that I entered on screen. In fact, if I turn off the BCC VR insert, enable my clip, we can see that this is the text that I've entered here. I want it to reference this, and this is just has to do with all about the operations that occur in Premiere Pro. What we can easily do is right-click this text and just nest it. We're just baking the change that we made in the effect controls to this text. So I'll call this text, and for motion graphics, I'm just going to give this a new BCC insert effect to the V1 track, and I'm going to repeat these steps. In fact, I don't even have to have this text on right now. I'm just going to disable it. So we're going to reference this now nest. So let's go here to video 2. You can see that little text far off in the background. And I'll go to the insert scale and just scale this up. And you can see there now it's referencing the changes that we made. If I go here to the insert latitude and then the insert longitude, we can sort of position it so it's right above the diver. And some of these controls, again, are available with that plane to sphere effect. But one thing that's not, and one thing that you can't control is essentially where your viewer is going to look in the head-mounted display. You can try to help them or guide them through the use of graphics or ambisonic sound, but you can't be sure where they're going to look. So for text callouts, it's always best to replicate them. Now we could duplicate this text several times inside of Premiere Pro, but inside the VR insert is a repeater. It's just above the reorient parameters. If we choose to repeat this, in this case, on the front and back, and I just want to show you how this will originally look if there's not a latitude and longitude change. So in fact, if I just reset this, you can sort of see here the front and now my text also appearing on the back. I also have other options available down here that I can choose, such as all sides, if I was definitely not sure of where a person would look, and other things such as front and 1/3, as well as 4 sides that you can pick to replicate your text inside of Premiere Pro. And you can do this really fluently. And then once you've done that, of course, you can change your insert latitude and longitude to their appropriate places. And now we have this graphic that's located here on the project. So integrating the motion graphic or essential graphics panel and combine that with the ability to just replicate your text in Premiere Pro really quickly and fluently is just a great use for insert. And just to show you one other example here in my timeline, I'm using another essential graphics panel template. It's just some credits here that I would like to put inside this project. And I'll do that again here. So here are my VR presents. This actually has some animation built onto it, as well as what's really good about this roll under the Essential Graphics panel is your ability to, roll your credits. So you can actually have some rolling here, pre-roll and post-roll. Keep in mind that although this starts off screen and ends off screen in this example, it's not going to do that inside of a sphere. Now that this text has this animation, I'm just going to sort of repeat some steps because I've made a change. I'm going to nest this text. I'm going to apply the VR insert again to the V1 track. Here, I'll make sure that I reference, in this case, the insert layer on video 2. And now we don't need to have our video 2 nested sequence enabled. Here is those credits. I'll come down here to the scaling properties. I'll make a change here in the latitude as well as the longitude. Maybe scale that up a bit more so we can see it a bit better. And then using a handy repeater, just make sure that this is repeated in 2 different areas within the frame and done really quickly and efficiently. I'm just to let you guys know on an iMac Pro right now, I also use a Dell 7720. So the performance when it comes to working in VR and 360, it's meant for handling this type of footage. Some of this footage can get quite large, but this and having these particular effects be graphic processor enabled and ready makes for a really nice experience with your text. This is kind of how it looks with the scroll. If we wanted to, we can of course turn that scroll and that animation off to suit our experience. Okay, so there's a little bit about our VR insert. I'm actually going to head back to my 180 example. So this is that 180-degree left and right stereoscopic footage. What I'm going to do is apply the immersive video blur, just to sort of show you that here's Premiere Pro's VR blur. And if we select its properties, we can choose from some different layouts We've got the monoscopic and the stereoscopic over under, but this is not meant for number one left and right footage, and it doesn't allow us to have a control to identify this as 180-degree footage. We can, however, blur this, and for some cases, this blur is great for when it comes to 360-degree spherical footage. Now let's just take a look at the BCC blur. So if I go here to the VR blur and apply this to the 180 clip, first of all, I'm going to choose a source. And this happens to be, as we know, stereo left, right, but our import horizontal field of view is 180 degrees. So right there, we have a 180-degree stereo left, right compatible blur ready to go with two controls, which are blur X and our blur Y. We could, of course, animate these properties by using these stopwatches. But my favorite part for using this blur, in some cases, is the ability to share it. So at any point in time in using this BCC VR blur plugin, we can choose to save these parameters. And I'm right now just going to head on to my system. I have a folder already created on my desktop for plugins for export. I'm just going to call this 180-degree VR blur. I'm going to choose to save that, and it's exported out this file. Now in the background, I actually have DaVinci Resolve open with the same 180-degree clip. In Resolve, and this can be used in any software, but in many workflows that I have with 360, people are working in different operating systems. And sometimes people we finish in Resolve because the colorist is knowledgeable in Resolve. And since it's going to be finished there, it's sometimes really nice to be able to share filters or effects or presets that we've set up. And we can do that no problem. In fact, we could head over to our Open Effects plugins. This is where all the BCC plugins are stored, and I'll just do a search here, like Premiere for any VR filters. And here you'll see that we have indeed a BCC VR blur. If I select this clip and head over to my inspector, to the Open Effects tab, under this preset section, I'm just going to load what I just saved on my system. So go to the desktop, that plugins for export folder. Here's my 180 VR blur all set up. If I choose to open it, we just now make sure the source is all set up properly. Stereo left, right, 180 degrees, and also containing the changes that I made to my blur X and blur Y. This is awesome. I'm able to share that with another video editor or colorists, and as long as they have the BCC VR units installed. And keep in mind, again, you can download that right now today. Is that right, Ross? You can actually download them for free right now?
Yeah, that's right. The 5 Continuum VR filters that you've been talking about so far are all available for free, including that multi-host license, which is a really great thing.
Yeah, so very cool to be able to share that cross-platform and easily, as you can see, load it in to another application. So looking at just a couple more filters from the VR units, I'm going to head to another sequence here called VR Sharpen. And this allows for a ton of sharpening control. So here is the clip already sharpened just to sort of show you. And the reason that you want to sharpen is that many times when you look at your 360 video in a head-mounted display, it's going to look soft. I've heard from multiple 360 VR editors that when it comes to sharpening, what you want to do is usually almost double the amount that you think you need. Because when you export out your video and then watch this on a head-mounted display, you might think, oh man, I needed more sharpening. So sharpening is incredibly important so your image doesn't look extremely soft in a head-mounted display experience, as well as it just doesn't look soft when you're watching it on YouTube. So this VR Sharpen offers for a ton of control. So if I drag this onto a clip here, we can see some automatic sharpening taking place. In fact, I'll just try to turn that off and on. These are with the default settings. If we start to explore the effect controls here, You've got separate controls for the sharpening strength, ability to preserve fine details. And if you look at my program monitor, you'll see that there are some on-screen controls available. Usually these are some of the most used parameters of a given effect, and you have access to play around with them in the program monitor. You also have detail tuning controls here for your sharpness threshold and master. And again, just a ton of controls for preserving some of the fine details in your image and making sure that your sharpening for your 360 experience is just right.
Hey, Nick, can I
So
jump in here for 1 second?
yes, totally.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Yeah, I think the VR Sharpen is one of the most popular filters that you see inside of the VR unit, specifically because it adds so much more beyond what is found in the Adobe Immersive VR Sharpen. I wanted to point out that we have had some users who are asking about the rendering speed. And two things there. The very first version of the VR unit that we shipped, this is back, I don't know, 6 months or so ago, that VR Sharpen filter was not GPU optimized. So if you have an old version of the VR unit, you want to update it to the newest 11.02, which we did. We've optimized the VR sharpening to be faster to run on your video card. Obviously, the faster your
Cool.
video card, the faster that will go. But if you scroll down to that edge sensitivity, I think it's towards the bottom, you can also you can change that to be faster, which even the so this will give you can still get a pretty high quality sharpen, but by changing that to faster, you're going to be using a little bit less processing. So that's another quick tip there.
Awesome. And I just, by the way, Ross, while you were talking, and I don't know if anyone caught this, but I actually changed there's some compare parameters at the top of this effect, which I think are pretty cool, where you can do side-by-side comparisons of your before and after results and be able to sort of slide. Here, this is actually best shown in a compare mode. On my right is the sharpened image, and on the left is the softer original version. I'm kind of wiping this.
Nick, maybe you can zoom into your screen just for the webinar purpose, or make your screen a little bigger for the because yeah, I think this is that
Just
compare
because I'm
mode
using
is.
I'm using two windows. That's the only
Yeah.
the problem here. If I could always press Control tilde to bring up the full display, but you can sort of see here the softer version on the left-hand side and the sharper version on the right. And what's controlling this wipe line is the wipe just underneath that compare mode.
Yeah, I think that's a cool feature, especially when you're working with a client, with a producer, to be able to show them that compare mode is in almost every single continuum effect. That's a really cool thing. And then another great thing too, while we're talking about it, is just the ability, if you've worked on this sharpen and you've liked this, that you've dialed in a really good parameters for a particular clip, and then you're going to use this again and again, you just save that as a preset.
Yeah, so at any time you can save this as a preset, cross-platform saved, as well as you can save various versions of this directly in Premiere Pro too. You can save this as a preset to that library too. In fact, you can save 3, 4 different types of VR effects and save them as a bundle directly inside of Premiere Pro.
Very cool.
Cool. So I have one more, the last unit effect to cover, which happens to be Flickr Fixer. And I'm showing this example just because it happens to be, or highlight the point the most. Certain 360 VR prosumer cameras in certain light situations might produce an unwanted or undesirable flicker. Oh, that's a little bit of a warning. I'm gonna have to start this up slowly, but that image in particular happened to be full of flicker. And by using the Flickr Fixer, we can easily get rid of that 360 VR unwanted flicker that is produced by those prosumer cameras in certain lighting situations. So as I load back Premiere Pro, I'm actually going to just show you the after version. There's different types of analysis modes that you can use inside of Premiere Pro. Let me just save up this new version of the project. Let's call this a little bit of a bonus here in the webinar. There we go, make a copy. Might just have to find this sequence again. Hopefully it's still open. Okay. There we go. So here is the before version. And let me just play this back full screen. Okay. So sorry, here we can see the flicker that's occurring here in the image. And here I have an unrendered version where this clip has Flickr Fixer on it. And this is a stereoscopic top-bottom clip. What we can see here is the method that was used, but you have a variety of different methods. In fact, let me just go here to the effect controls to show that you can do a frame analysis or a temporal smooth RGB or YCC to solve that flicker problem. And like the previous effect, you've got your compare modes in here where we can do side-by-side comparisons of the before and after effects using a slide control. So just a really nice feature to have directly inside the Flickr Fixer effect. Okay. Cool. So those are the VR units, the 5 in particular, the cross-platform effects that you can use directly inside of Premiere Pro. We've got Sharpen, we've got Flickr Fixer. You've seen with the use of the insert your ability to replicate titles as well as text inside of Premiere Pro, reorient as well as blur, which you can, of course, save cross-platform. Now I wanted to show just a couple things inside of Mocha VR and how this can be such a beneficial tool, especially if you want to just keep your workflow all contained inside of Premiere for 360 VR editing. So I'm going to show you a task that, if I looked at it the first time, would think that it would take a lot of time to solve. And I'm going to do all of this workflow directly inside of Premiere Pro using Mocha VR and not even having to step inside of Mocha VR. So just to tell this little story, this is the shot that's in front of us. It's a stereoscopic top-bottom shot. And if we take a quick close look at it, if I go here to, there is a camera here at the bottom of the scene. Let me just make sure that my settings are correct for my sequence. Uh-oh.
All right, Nick, are you still with us?
I am still with you. I just have a white
Okay.
screen, unfortunately. And this is just something to do sometimes when you switch windows inside of Premiere Pro, and mostly has to do with the graphics card conflict. So I'm trying to get out of here, but to no avail. So I might have to just do a reset, unfortunately, and just sort of talk about this workflow.
Okay. I'm trying to think. Maybe can you force a quit there? Otherwise, maybe we can jump into my screen and talk through this a little bit.
I think it might be beneficial just to talk about it through your screen. I'm going to try to hop back in here in a second, as I'm just not having any luck with a force quit. It's a reset.
Okay, let me actually see if I can really quickly bring up one of these shots here. I'm actually running After Effects, but I think we can, it's going to be the same similar kind of workflow here.
This is actually the part of the webinar I can be familiar with most is crashing in VR. This is what my VR experience is like.
Okay, guys, let me see if I can share my screen here. All right, Brian, you might have to confirm with me if you can see my screen.
Yep, I can see it.
All right, so yeah, we're kind of running on the fly here, folks, but bear with us. Let's hide this thing here. So yeah, I'm gonna, Nick, are you still with us as well? Or is Nick forced to maybe bail out? All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about Mocha VR, I guess. And I think that one of the things that Nick was going to show was how to remove objects. And there's a couple different ways that we can remove objects in Mocha VR. Many people have heard of Mocha Pro, which is used to analyze motion and uses temporal information to track and to remove objects. And it's very successful for removing the camera. Um, what I'm going to talk about in this shot is actually removing an object where the clean area is not found in the image. And I think Nick was going to show you a stereo clip. This will work in stereo or mono. But basically, we have this a 360 clip where this was actually a time-lapse shot where if we look down, we basically see a slider. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Mocha VR, but we're not going to use the interface. We're just going to use Mocha VR's distortion model to basically take our equirectangular image and flatten it. And again, this would work in stereo as well. For some of the people who had checked out Mocha VR about a year ago when we first launched, we did not support stereoscopic. We added this about 4 months ago. So we have this top, bottom, left, right stereo support. This is monoclip. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our module renders here. And I'm just going to turn on undistort. And essentially this is going to convert our equirectangular into a flattened view. So then what we're going to do is look at the bottom. So we're basically going to look at the nadir of this shot. And this is our slider, a time-lapse slider. I, of course, would recommend that people would take some stills of their set, you know, on their shoots. If you have a small digital camera or even your phone, sometimes just getting references before you actually shoot of different areas of the scene is going to give you more information to help you with your removes. But I'm just going to change my longitude setting here to be something like this. So essentially, I'm just going to kind of flatten out my image, and I'm using this Mocha VR plugin here. And again, Nick was about to show it working in Premiere as well. But here, it's really the same exact workflow. So here on my one layer, I have a Mocha VR instance, and I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to just turn it off. And then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate that clip and paste. We're going to basically paste that on top of itself. Now, so essentially I'm using the Mocha VR's lens distortion mode to flatten my image. Then I can really just use almost any kind of paint and clone technique that you like. If I'm in After Effects at this point, what I would do is go into our layer settings and pre-comp this. But in Premiere, you can get the same kind of workflow by using the nest. This just has to do with the way that Adobe processes effects. Some of these effects, you kind of need to trick the host into thinking it's its own layer. So by just doing this pre-comp here, we've kind of tricked the Adobe host into thinking that is like it's not like a live effect. It's just basically a flattened comp there. Now at this point, then we can duplicate this and really get into paint or any kind of clone kind of technique that you like. So here what I would do is maybe do something like this, you know, some kind of quick hacky version. Obviously, if we had more time, I would take take some time and really finesse this. But we're just essentially just creating a little garbage mask here, offsetting it in a paint and clone kind of way. We actually have a lot of tutorials on our website. Martin, our product manager, did a nice tutorial where he did the same kind of technique using paint. But here I'm just doing a simple garbage matte offset. I'll touch MM here to get to my mask properties, and then I'll just feather the edges a little bit. So we have something like, yeah, hey.
Oh, Nick's back. I wanted to interrupt you to let you know, but just continue on, and then maybe
Okay,
when you
yeah.
pause, Nick can take over.
Yeah, that's great. So basically, I'm just covering, what Nick was going to show in stereo. I'm covering it on a mono clip for this example, but essentially we've taken our equirectangular, we flattened it using Mocha VR, and then we're going to take those two layers, composite them down into one layer. So now on layer 2 here, we've cleaned this up really quickly. There's our original below it. So if you remember, I still have this Mocha VR that's disabled here on my bottom layer. We're going to copy it, paste it one more time, and then we're going to use this undistort setting. We're just going to invert it by hitting distort. Turn that on there, and then you'll see you have this kind of really nice flattened and cleaned view. If we look at this layer on its own, this is our pre-comp where we've done our basically our offset garbage mask, and then we're putting that on top of our original layer just to kind of create the whole thing back together. So that's a really nice workflow for removing objects without having to go into the Mocha VR interface. So Nick, if you're back,
I'm totally back.
Okay, let me see if I can.
So
that's on the fly webinar presentations for you guys, folks. But let's change this back to you.
There we go. Okay, so I'm back, and I kind of tried to catch up to Ross's steps here
Great. Thank you.
by replicating the process here in Premiere Pro. So I'm going to just show you what I did already. So here we have the original clip. And if I just take a look at it, here's the original clip. All I did was I placed Mocha VR in it. And as Ross has already showed you, I'm not even stepping inside of Mocha VR. I'm clicking on render. I chose a undistorted view, which happens to be staring at my camera and at the nadir. All I did was, after I had my view set up, I created a nest that I called view, and then made a duplicated version of it. Okay, so here, if we're looking at this sequence, here's my original shot. I just turned that off. Here's the view shot, and I just made a copy of this. And on the copy, I did a little bit of an offset, specifically with the motion parameters here. So I did this first by offsetting the position of the top image, okay? And after I had this in place, the area, just to let you know, that I wanted to cover over the camera, I then went to my opacity settings inside of Premiere Pro, and here are some mask settings. So I added two masks. I added an ellipse mask for my top image, and I feathered it to death, so basically to 300%, to create a nice soft edge. I then created a second mask for the bottom here. You can see here that I've also feathered this and added a mask expansion. And finally, just to blend this in a little bit better, the patch. If I went to the Lumetri controls here, and under Lumetri color, just started to play with the exposure of the shot. So this is just like a negative 0.04 exposure. So they would just blend in a little bit better. But overall, without even having to step into the plugin, just by using Mocha VR's a way of basically being able to take a flat picture inside of your sphere, and using that technique to sort of paint and clone out moving footage is awesome. Like, the entire workflow can just stick inside of Premiere Pro. If I now take these two files, so again, just here's my top image that I painted on, you can sort of see what that looks like. Those are the two masks. My bottom image that doesn't have anything else, I take these two items, right click, nest them, and I'll call it paint. And just to follow this up, I'm going to apply Mocha VR to that. Make sure that my view is set appropriately, top, bottom. And I'm just going to essentially reverse what I did. I'm going to reverse the undistortion by adding distortion, making sure that I'm looking at the bottom of the shot. This is what it looks like without. Now combine it with the original shot, that's painted out. Now, once you get a hang of this, I think that, as a video editor, sometimes bridging on the subject of motion graphics and VFX is a question, is how much time do you have? And something that I did was I always said, if I can do a motion graphic task or a VFX task in 15 minutes, I'll do it. And if not, I'll farm it out. And this to me, like once you get a handle of this workflow, there are some tutorials online that, is there a tutorial on this, Ross, that demonstrates the distort,
Yes.
undistort?
Yeah,
There is? Okay.
are. If you go to the Boris FX website, to all the videos are tagged, so you could just go look at all the 360 videos, and there's a couple that cover this workflow.
Yeah, and this is something I could do in about 5 minutes without having to step into After Effects, and it's all done inside of Premiere Pro. So that's feature number one.
Yeah, I would also make a cool point, Nick, that that for kind of following up on your note about, well, so, at what point as a video editor do you say, well, this is going to take me too long, I might actually farm this out to my to a visual effects house or a visual effects specialist. A really cool workflow there is that you could take your 360 clips, process them using that Mocha VR undistort technique that we just covered, just actually render them out and give them to a VFX specialist who's like maybe someone who's an artist who's really great with paint and roto. They don't even need to realize that they're working in a 360 project. They just work on that flattened undistorted file, send the clips back to you, and then you can put the distortion back together.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you can basically do or start the job and then help them along the way and finish it. That's great with the cross-platform. And this is like just one example of many. Do I have time for one more example? I was going to show a horizon stabilization directly inside of Premiere, or at least the starting of it.
Yeah, I would go for it. I think that people are
Okay.
sticking online. So yeah, I think we're about 5 more minutes.
So, the same technique, number one, of removing a camera from a 360 shot. That can be done inside Mocha VR's interface for more complex situations. You can also, insert things into live footage, as well as you can do, which I think is probably a very needed task, especially with 360 footage, which is to stabilize your shots. And the reason for this is if you watch this clip in a head-mounted display, this is the one thing that's going to cause motion sickness to your viewer. In fact, you'll probably turn them off all 360 VR experiences from that point forward. As in, it's just by not having a stable horizon, you're just going to cause them not to feel ill. So here's a shot of some footage taken from a drone, and you can see how unstable this shot is. So let's go inside of Mocha VR and see what we can do, while continuing to work inside of Premiere Pro. So I'm going to apply Mocha VR to this clip, and right in the effect controls, we've got this button that just screams "press me," so I'll press it. We launch Mocha VR. And the first thing I'll draw your attention to, just to make you feel comfortable in this interface, is this little 360 button right here on the top right-hand corner. Allows us to view our 360 scene. And using the X key as a shortcut, we can move around our scene and experience things of how people would in a head-mounted display. Taking this a little bit further, we can, of course, choose from a bunch of preset views, your front camera, your back camera. And when I started to play around with the X tool, I essentially created a custom view. So that's just a really kind of handy tool of something that you can do or work with right inside of Mocha VR. And to solve this sort of stabilization, what I'm going to do is track something close to the horizon. And as I take a look, I think these mountains over here in the far distance make a good candidate. So the tool I'm going to use, and you can see where my playhead is, it's not at the beginning of the clip. I don't necessarily have to track at the beginning or at the end. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to select this tool up here called the X-Spline tool. I'm gonna make a really rough shape around this mountain. Double click to close. And if you press Command A, you can select all the points really easily on a Mac or Control A on a PC. Pull in to make it nice and soft, or pull out to essentially make it more rigid. Now that I have this shape, it's essentially a layer that's available here. We can rename this, can call this Horizon Track. One thing that I like to do, especially if you start to add multiple shapes for certain tracking situations, is to make sure that your color coding is right. So you've got a color code here for the outline. Let me pick something a little bit more obvious. There we go, lime. And then we've got another color control here. And this kind of corresponds with a matte or a paint bucket overlay, which you can easily turn on here to identify the region that you're tracking. Now that this is all set up, I could head down here to the track controls and sort of see what Mocha thinks will be a solution for my 360 footage. So it's going to use a certain amount of pixels in order to try to track this. And since we're working in 360, it's going to track everything here, all the way to perspective. And we saw that in the example of the shot, there was large motion. So knowing this is the way that I'm going to track, I'm just going to do or track a couple frames here, not this entire shot, it's fairly long. And I'm going to track backwards. And we can see here that it's doing a pretty good job of sticking with that area there that I identified there in the horizon. Okay. Now we're going to take this information from the track, and we're going to use it to reorient our shot. So that's pretty good. As you can see, this is the area that it's tracked so far, the area that's highlighted in that different color from the red. I'm going to take this information. We're going to pretend like I've done this to the entire shot. And we're going to move to what I like to call these rooms, or these are just ways of performing various tasks in 360. What you would like to be aware of is your ability to insert things into shots, to remove cameras from shots, and then to reorient your horizon. The price of admission to this, for me, comes in, while there are different ways of stabilizing inside of After Effects, there's not really a visual way of you being able to see how you're stabilizing your horizon. And this is what this reorient window allows us to do. It allows us to show a control while also viewing a horizon. And in using this control, I can align it appropriately. By the way, I can drag this to different portions of the horizon. If I need to, I can reset. Just start again with the show control. And essentially, we can take this information from our tracked shot and use it to stabilize the entire sphere. So now to get this back into Premiere Pro, all I do is I close Mocha. I'm going to choose to save it. And on this shot, which I've just added the Mocha VR, I can choose all those rooms or module renders that were inside of Mocha. So in this case, that happens to be Reorient. If I choose to render it, anything that I did track successfully, this kind of portion over here, would carry over. There we go. You can kind of see that it's much more stable over the area that I did track in those few minutes that we were there. But to see a final result, so this is, just to sort of show you, this is the shot untracked. I've got a finalized version here of something I did yesterday. And there you can see that experience is going to be much better for people watching your drone footage through a head-mounted display, or just in general, and have a nice stabilized experience. And And keep in mind, you can also combine this with additional modules, such as the remove, to get rid of this drone altogether. So that was the other example that I wanted to show, Ross, in terms of the flexibility of Mocha VR, not only doing tasks inside of Premiere Pro, but quickly going over into Mocha and doing somewhat, I would say, in certain situations, utility-based tasks in order to provide a great 360 VR experience.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I'm glad you got that that little quick stabilization example in, because it is probably one of the, as you know, one of the most common things that we hear about with people who have 360 cameras. They want to create immersive experiences and move their cameras around, whether it's on a drone or a slider, or on a boat or hang gliders. We're seeing all kinds of moving camera footage. So stabilizing that footage and reducing the nausea-inducing camera, motion is a really important aspect of 360 post. Someone actually asked a good question, which is, they just asked, isn't the stitching software the job where you would do the stabilize? And that is a good question. I mean, some of the stitching applications out there, like Mystica VR, have good stabilization capabilities. But when you get into a shot where the camera is moving, especially if the areas that you're trying to track are out of focus, or if the camera is moving, through a real different kind of terrain, that kind of thing, that could be very, very difficult to stabilize using some of the stitching applications. So that's why some of the 360 users are turning to Mocha VR for their stabilization tasks. So I think at this point we've actually gone over our time limit, so we really appreciate everyone hanging in. Nick, you did a great job, and I understand jumping from a bunch of different systems and going through the hurdles that we all face working on computers. Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, note to self to not have After Effects, DaVinci Resolve, and Premiere at the same time running,
and trying
while
to
playing
stream.
360 VR, while trying to stream at the same time.
Trying to stream.
Too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, someone's asking a question right now. Do we have time to touch on color correction? And I apologize, Benjamin, we really don't have time on this webinar. You'll find lots of tutorials on the Boris FX website. And again, if you go to the video section, they are tagged by subject. So at this point, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Jesse. I think, Jesse, you're going to announce the winners of the contest.
Yes. Congratulations.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Great job.
Congratulations to Kevin Bourne, who has won the 1-year subscription to Continuum. Congratulations to Marjorie Tran, who has won the Mocha VR 1-year subscription. Congratulations to Ruben Hill, who has won the 1-year Sapphire subscription. And congratulations to Autumn Andara, who has won the Mocha Pro 1-year subscription. You'll each be receiving an email from me shortly. I just want to say thanks again to everyone who attended, and we hope you attend our next webinar. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.